Between 1862 and 1865, 14 children vanished from the Sacred Heart Orphanage in Pennsylvania. They weren't adopted or transferred. They simply disappeared from every record, as though they had never lived. Local Protestant families began appearing with Irish Catholic children laboring on their farms, children who carried the distinct scars of life in an institution and spoke with thick accents. When questioned, the stories of these families never matched. Recently uncovered correspondence between the Mother Superior and Philadelphia's bishop reveals the horrifying reality. These children weren't missing. They were sold. Before we go deeper into the story of Sacred Heart Orphanage, this channel isn't for everyone. Only for those brave enough to face the darkest chapters of American history. If you're ready to uncover secrets that powerful institutions have tried to bury forever, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell. And I want to know. Comment below and tell me what state you're listening from. Are you brave enough to learn what truly happened to those 14 innocent souls? Let's find out together. The truth behind Sacred Heart's missing children starts not with their disappearance, but with the desperate conditions that first brought them to Pennsylvania's rolling hills. In 1862, Lancaster County was a patchwork of prosperity and prejudice. Fertile farmland produced abundant wheat and corn that fed Union soldiers in the Civil War, enriching Protestant, German, and English farmers beyond their ancestors' dreams. But prosperity brought problems. With so many young men off at war, farms desperately needed workers during critical planting and harvest seasons. The labor shortage was reaching a crisis just as government contracts promised unprecedented profits to anyone who could meet the demand. Into this landscape of opportunity and desperation came Sacred Heart Orphanage, founded in 1859 by the Sisters of Mercy from Philadelphia. The 3-story brick building stood on 40 acres of donated land just outside the small town of Strasburg. Its Gothic Revival architecture rose like a Catholic fortress among the simple Protestant meeting houses and Lutheran churches dotting the countryside. The building's pointed arches and cross-topped bell tower made it impossible to ignore, which was precisely what troubled many locals. Mother Superior Catherine O'Malley, a sharp-eyed woman of 45, had arrived from County Cork 20 years earlier with nothing but fierce determination and unshakable faith. She spoke with the lilting accent of her homeland, but her business sense was purely American. Under her leadership, Sacred Heart had grown from housing 12 children to nearly 60 by 1862. The orphanage took in Irish Catholic children from Philadelphia's overcrowded tenements, as well as the children of Irish immigrants who had died building the Pennsylvania Railroad through treacherous western mountain passes. The children ranged from 5 to 16, their faces marked by the distinctive pallor of institutional life and the hollow-eyed wariness of those who learned early that the world offered no guarantees. They wore identical gray wool uniforms, simple dresses for the girls, plain trousers and shirts for the boys, and attended daily mass in the orphanage's small chapel. Older children helped with cooking, cleaning, and tending the extensive vegetable gardens that helped feed everyone. Sister Agnes Flanagan, the orphanage's treasurer and Mother Molly's closest confidant, kept meticulous records of every penny entering or leaving Sacred Heart's coffers. Her ledgers, written in a precise Irish hand, documented the constant struggle to keep the institution solvent. The Catholic Diocese of Philadelphia provided some funding, but wealthy Catholic donors were scarce in Pennsylvania, and the ongoing war had made charity even harder. By 1862, Sacred Heart was running a serious deficit, a fact that kept Mother Molly awake through long winter nights. The local Protestant community viewed the orphanage with suspicion bordering on hostility. The Know Nothing movement had stirred Catholic sentiment across Pennsylvania in the 1850s, and the Civil War did little to ease tensions. Protestant ministers regularly preached about the dangers of papist influence, and local newspapers printed letters complaining about the orphanage's foreign children and their loyalty to Rome. Some farmers refused to do business with Sacred Heart entirely, while others charged inflated prices for grain and supplies. Into this atmosphere of religious tension and economic pressure arrived Father Michael Brennan in the spring of 1862. The diocese sent him to serve as Sacred Heart's chaplain and to help Mother Molly navigate the worsening financial situation. Father Brennan was a different kind of priest, ambitious, charming, with a merchant's eye for opportunity. Unlike the elderly Irish priest who served before him, Brennan was Philadelphia, born and understood the delicate balance between Catholic principle and American pragmatism. At 38, Father Brennan cut an impressive figure in his black cassock, his dark hair always perfectly combed, and his shoes polished to a military shine. He spoke without an accent, having been educated at St. Charles Seminary in Philadelphia, and he possessed the rare ability to make both Catholics and Protestants feel at ease in his presence. Local Protestant ministers found him surprisingly reasonable, and wealthy German farmers discovered he understood their concerns about labor shortages and wartime production. What none realized was that Father Brennan's understanding went deeper than sympathy. He saw opportunity where others saw only problems, and he began crafting a solution that would benefit everyone involved, except, perhaps, the children of Sacred Heart Orphanage. The first sign of change came in late May 1862, when Mother Molly announced to the staff that several older children would be placed with local families to help with spring planting. This wasn't unusual in itself. Orphanages had long arranged for older children to work as farmhands or domestic servants. But Sister Agnes noticed the arrangements were being handled personally by Father Brennan, not through the diocese's usual placement procedures. When she asked to see paperwork, Father Brennan assured her he was handling all documentation himself to avoid burdening the diocese's overworked administrators. The morning of June 15, 1862, dawned gray and humid, thunderclouds building over the Susquehanna Valley. Timothy Walsh, a red-haired 14-year-old who had been at Sacred Heart for 3 years, was helping Sister Margaret in the vegetable garden when Father Brennan approached with a well-dressed Protestant gentleman introduced as Mr. Ezra Hoffman, a prosperous wheat farmer from Lancaster Township. Timothy had been expecting this moment for weeks. Father Brennan had spoken to him privately about working for a good Protestant family who would treat him fairly and pay wages to help support the orphanage. The boy was eager to contribute. He had seen Mother Molly's worried expression during meals, had overheard hushed conversations about unpaid bills and dwindling supplies. If working for a Protestant farmer could help Sacred Heart survive, Timothy was willing. Mr. Hoffman examined Timothy with the practiced eye of a man used to evaluating livestock. He checked the boy's hands for calluses, had him lift a grain bag to test his strength, and asked about his experience with horses and equipment. Satisfied, Hoffman nodded to Father Brennan and counted out 45 in gold coins, an enormous sum, more than most workers earned in 3 months. "The boy will work through harvest," Hoffman said, his Pennsylvania Dutch accent thick with authority. "He'll live in the barn loft with my other hands. I'll send him back in November when the work is done." Father Brennan blessed Timothy and told him he was performing a great service for both his faith and his country. The Protestant farmer needed workers to produce grain for Union soldiers, and Timothy's labor would help feed the brave men fighting to preserve the Union. Sister Agnes watched from the kitchen window as Timothy climbed into Hoffman's wagon, his few possessions bundled in a cloth sack. Something about the transaction troubled her, though she couldn't say what. Perhaps it was the speed of the arrangement, or that Hoffman paid in gold rather than the paper currency most used during wartime. But Father Brennan seemed confident, and Mother Molly had approved it, so Sister Agnes pushed her concerns aside and returned to her ledgers. 3 days later, 16-year-old Margaret Connolly disappeared under similar circumstances. She was taken by Mrs. Sarah Zimmerman, wife of a prosperous German farmer, ostensibly to work as a household servant and help care for the Zimmermans' infant twins. Margaret was a bright girl with a gift for languages. She had learned Pennsylvania, Dutch from German immigrants in Philadelphia, and could read Latin well enough to assist at Mass. Mrs. Zimmerman paid 60 thalers for Margaret's services, explaining she needed urgent help because her regular servant had run off to Philadelphia to work in a munitions factory. The pattern continued all summer. Every 2 or 3 weeks, Father Brennan would arrive with another prospective employer. Always Protestant, always wealthy, always in desperate need of immediate help. The payments grew larger as harvest approached, and labor grew scarcer. 13-year-old Patrick Murphy went to a merchant family in Lancaster for 50. 15-year-old Bridget O'Brien was placed with a banker's family in Columbia for 75. 12-year-old Sean McMahon, despite his youth, was taken by a mill owner who claimed he needed a boy to help with horses. By September 1862, 8 children had been placed with Protestant families, and Sacred Heart's financial situation had improved dramatically. The orphanage paid off debts, bought new winter clothing, and even added a small building extension to accommodate more orphans from Philadelphia. Mother Molly praised Father Brennan's success, and the Sisters of Mercy relaxed their concerns about the future. But Sister Agnes remained uneasy. She noticed none of the placed children had written back, unusual since children placed in previous years always kept in touch. More troubling, when she tried to visit Timothy at the Hoffman farm, she was turned away at the gate and told the boy was too busy with harvest work to see visitors. The breaking point came on a cold October morning when Sister Agnes encountered Mrs. Hoffman at the Lancaster market. Approaching her to ask after Timothy's welfare, Sister Agnes was met with confusion. Mrs. Hoffman insisted her husband had never employed any orphans from Sacred Heart, that their farm workers were all local men exempted from military service for essential agricultural work. When Sister Agnes pressed, Mrs. Hoffman grew agitated and suggested the sister was mistaken about which farm Timothy had been sent to. But Sister Agnes was certain. She had watched Timothy leave in Ezra Hoffman's wagon, and Father Brennan had given his word the boy was at the Hoffman farm. The contradiction made no sense unless someone was lying. That evening, Sister Agnes confronted Father Brennan in his small office behind the chapel. She demanded the truth about Timothy and the others, insisting on seeing written agreements for their placements. Father Brennan was dismissive at first, suggesting Sister Agnes was confused and had misunderstood Mrs. Hoffman. But when the sister threatened to write directly to the bishop in Philadelphia, Father Brennan's demeanor changed completely. His friendly smile vanished, replaced by a cold stare that seemed to look through her. "Sister Agnes," he said quietly, "you must understand these are complicated times. The war has created opportunities that good Catholics must seize for the greater good of our faith and our institution. Those children are safe and well cared for, and their sacrifice ensures Sacred Heart can continue to serve God's purposes." "What sacrifice?" Sister Agnes demanded. "What have you done with those children?" Father Brennan leaned back, steepling his fingers. I have found them homes where they can contribute to the war effort while learning valuable skills from Protestant families who appreciate their labor. In return, these families have made generous donations that have secured our future. It's an arrangement that benefits everyone involved. But Mrs. Hoffman said what she needed to say to protect her family's privacy. Father Brennan interrupted. The families who have taken our children value discretion, and we must respect that. Some arrangements are best kept confidential, especially during wartime. Sister Agnes felt a chill unrelated to the October weather. Father, are you telling me you have sold those children? The word hung between them like a curse. Father Brennan's eyes narrowed, his voice now carrying an unmistakable threat. I'm telling you, sister, that you have a choice. You can continue to serve God faithfully at Sacred Heart, focusing on your duties and trusting the wisdom of your superiors. Or you can pursue questions that will bring nothing but trouble to this institution and everyone in it. The bishop sent me here to solve Sacred Heart's problems. And I have. I suggest you remember where your loyalties lie. The winter of 1862-63 passed in uneasy silence at Sacred Heart. Sister Agnes continued as treasurer, but the joy was gone from her work. Studying the ledgers with new eyes, she noticed patterns previously missed. The donations that had appeared so providentially all summer came from the same vague entry labeled placement services, corresponding exactly with the dates children had been taken. She began to understand what she had witnessed was not charitable placement, but something far darker. The children hadn't been adopted or traditionally indentured. They had been sold to Protestant families who wanted workers, but didn't want to pay adult wages. The transactions were disguised as charitable arrangements, but the substantial payments made it clear. Sacred Heart was running a human trafficking operation under the cover of religious charity. The realization tormented Sister Agnes through long winter nights. She had taken vows of obedience to her superiors, but also vows to protect the innocent children in her care. The 8 children who disappeared that summer had been her responsibility, and she had failed them utterly. Their trust had been betrayed not by strangers or enemies, but by the very institution that promised them safety. Mother Molly seemed genuinely unaware of the true nature of Father Brennan's arrangements. She spoke proudly of the orphanage's improved finances and praised the priest's success finding good homes for older children. When Sister Agnes raised concerns about the lack of letters, Mother Molly dismissed her worries, saying Protestant families often discouraged workers from keeping ties to Catholic institutions. Those children are beginning new lives, Mother Molly said firmly. We must trust God has guided them where they need to be and focus on caring for the children who remain. But Father Brennan was already planning to expand. As spring approached, he began conducting evaluations of the children, assessing their physical condition, work skills, and temperament. He paid special attention to recent arrivals from Philadelphia, newcomers with few friends at the orphanage, whose disappearance would cause less disruption. The priest had also cultivated relationships with a broader network of Protestant families across Lancaster and neighboring counties. The success of his initial placements created demand for more workers, and the coming planting season promised even higher prices for healthy, trainable children. Father Brennan spoke of expanding to include children from other Catholic institutions in Pennsylvania, creating what he called a regional placement service that would benefit multiple orphanages while meeting Protestant farming communities' labor needs. Sister Agnes realized she was witnessing the birth of a systematic trade in human beings, exploiting both Catholic institutions desperation and Protestant employers' prejudices. Catholic orphanages needed money to survive. Protestant families needed workers cheaper than adult laborers. Father Brennan had found a way to profit from both needs while maintaining a veneer of religious respectability. The psychological impact on the remaining children was subtle but unmistakable. They noticed the older children who left for placements never returned or wrote. Unlike children placed in previous years, whispered conversations in the dormitories revealed growing anxiety about their own futures. The children began to see reaching their teens, not as a step toward independence, but as a sign they might be next to disappear. 10-year-old Mary Catherine Donovan, who had been close to Margaret Connolly, began having nightmares about being taken by strangers. She'd wake screaming, crying for Margaret and begging the sisters not to let Protestant men take her. When Sister Agnes tried to comfort her, Mary Catherine clung desperately and whispered, "They're not coming back, are they? Margaret and Timothy and the others, they're never coming back." The question haunted Sister Agnes because she increasingly suspected Mary Catherine was right. The taken children weren't being trained for independence or given better lives. They were being consumed by a system valuing their labor more than their humanity. Once they entered that system, they effectively ceased to exist as individuals with rights and futures. As snow melted and spring appeared in the gardens, Sister Agnes made a decision that would ultimately expose the full horror of Father Brennan's operation. She began keeping a secret record of every placed child. Names, ages, physical descriptions, and the families who had supposedly taken them. She also discreetly questioned recent arrivals from Philadelphia about siblings or friends at other Catholic institutions in the region. What she discovered confirmed her worst fears. Sacred Heart's missing children were part of a much larger exploitation network stretching across Pennsylvania and possibly beyond. In March 1863, as the Civil War entered its bloodiest phase, Father Brennan received an unexpected visitor who would unravel his carefully built network. Bishop Francis Kendrick of Philadelphia arrived unannounced at Sacred Heart, ostensibly for a routine inspection of the diocese's rural institutions. But Sister Agnes quickly realized the visit was anything but routine. Bishop Kendrick was a stern, intellectual man who had risen through church hierarchy, combining theological scholarship with administrative precision. He had been receiving troubling reports from other Catholic institutions across Pennsylvania. Reports of children disappearing without proper documentation and suspicious financial windfalls coinciding with these disappearances. The pattern had become too obvious to ignore, and the bishop came to Sacred Heart to investigate personally. Father Brennan received the bishop with elaborate courtesy, touring the orphanage's improved facilities and praising the Sisters of Mercy for their dedication. He presented financial records with pride, explaining how his innovative placement program had transformed Sacred Heart from a struggling institution into a model of efficiency. The bishop listened without comment, his pale eyes taking in every detail. But when he asked to see documentation for children placed with local families, Father Brennan's confidence cracked. He explained records were stored securely in Lancaster and couldn't be retrieved immediately. He promised them within a few days, but the bishop insisted on seeing them before leaving the next morning. That evening, as Father Brennan worked frantically in his office to create the required documents, Sister Agnes made a courageous decision. She approached Bishop Kendrick privately and requested a confidential meeting. The bishop, who had served in Pennsylvania long enough to recognize signs of institutional corruption, agreed. In the orphanage's small library, lit by a single oil lamp, Sister Agnes revealed everything she had discovered about Father Brennan's operation. She presented her secret records of the missing children, described her encounter with Mrs. Hoffman at the Lancaster market, and explained her growing suspicions about the true nature of the placement services. Bishop Kendrick listened in grim silence as Sister Agnes detailed what amounted to a systematic slave trade under Catholic Charities cover. When she finished, the bishop sat quietly for several minutes, weighing the implications. Finally, he spoke with absolute authority. Sister Agnes, what you have told me represents one of the gravest scandals in our diocese's history. If your suspicions are correct, Father Brennan has violated his sacred vows and committed crimes against both church and civil law. I want you to understand, pursuing this will likely close Sacred Heart and damage the church's reputation in Pennsylvania. Are you prepared for those consequences? Sister Agnes met his gaze without flinching. Your Excellency, I took vows to serve God and protect the innocent. Those 14 children trusted us to keep them safe, and we failed them. If Sacred Heart must close to prevent this happening to other children, then that is God's will. The bishop nodded slowly. Very well. Tomorrow morning I will confront Father Brennan with your allegations. I want you present as a witness, and I want every document you've compiled. We will get to the truth of this matter, regardless of the cost. But Father Brennan hadn't risen to his position without a keen sense of self-preservation. He had noticed the private meeting between Sister Agnes and Bishop Kendrick, and correctly interpreted the sister's refusal to meet his eyes during evening prayers. That night, as the orphanage slept, Father Brennan gathered his most important documents and what money he could carry, and disappeared into the Pennsylvania countryside. By morning, he was gone, along with nearly 300 from Sacred Heart's treasury and all records of his placement operations. He left only a brief note, claiming he had been called to serve as a military chaplain, and was departing immediately for the front lines. The note said nothing of the missing children or the families who had taken them. Bishop Kendrick was furious at the priest's escape, but also relieved to have confirmation Sister Agnes' allegations were true. Father Brennan's flight was as good as a confession, freeing the bishop to take immediate action, uncovering the conspiracy's full extent. He dispatched investigators to locate the missing children and began determining which other institutions might have been involved in similar operations. What they discovered over the following weeks was a corruption network, exploiting dozens of children across multiple counties. Father Brennan had been working with at least 3 other priests and had relationships with Protestant families throughout southeastern Pennsylvania. The operation had generated thousands in illegal profits while condemning vulnerable children to unpaid labor and social isolation. But the investigation also revealed something more disturbing. Several placed children couldn't be located at all. Some families had moved to other states, taking children with them and leaving no forwarding addresses. Others claimed children had run away or died from illness, but provided no documentation. The trail of at least 6 children, including Timothy Walsh and Margaret Connolly, had gone completely cold. The discovery that several children remained missing transformed Bishop Kendrick's investigation from an internal church matter into a criminal case involving state and federal authorities. The bishop realized some missing children might have been transported across state lines, making their disappearance a federal crime under interstate commerce and kidnapping laws. In April 1863, as the investigation expanded, Sister Agnes received an unexpected visitor, providing the first real breakthrough. Jacob Stolt,